Hey guys, this is Hardy with Ninja Everyday, and we're here with the second installment of our Masters of Toshindo video series. And I have with me Master Mark Russo from the Tampa Quest Self-Defense Dojo.
That's
correct?
Yep.
And I'm really grateful for you taking some time to answer some questions. Particularly interested in your martial arts history, some of your more influential teachers, some of the high and low points in your martial arts and that sort of stuff. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in martial arts and ultimately in the ninjutsu and Toshindo world?
Yeah, I started when I was 8, and long story short, I used to sneak down the hall at night and hide under the couch and watch TV.
Okay.
My parents didn't know I was there, and saw a James Bond movie similar to what, Anji was older than I, but had very similar experience. And You Only Live Twice had these ninja guys in there. And thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and so told my mom I wanted to, do karate or something, and she thought karate was too violent. Back then, they would push that judo translated to the gentle way, so that resonated with my mom. So she let me do judo. So I started with judo, and then moved on to. By the time I met Anshu, I had high level black belt teaching licenses in 4 different martial systems, and I studied Taekwondo under Jun Ri, who was a big name back then. I studied Okinawan Shorin-ryu under a man named Glenn Premru, who was a very big name back then. So I was fortunate enough to find some really good teachers. But in my mid to late 20s, I started to, my body was changing, and that combined with, I started to get bored because, Taekwondo, there are X number of kicks, and there are only so many ways to punch, and so I started to find myself getting bored. I was, I'd been competing and won my share of trophies and that sort of thing, and I knew then editor of Black Belt Magazine, a man named John Corcoran.
Okay.
And I met with him, and I told him, I'm kind of getting bored. I'm looking for something different. And he listed all the names of the big He-Il Cho, Takubota, all these big names back then. He said, I could get you lessons with any of these guys. And I had recently seen one of Anshu's books. And I remember I said, hey, is any of this ninja crap for real? And I said, this Stephen Hayes guy, and I'll never forget it. He responded, oh, Stevie. And I'm like, oh,
wow.
Stevie. Yeah. He said, sure, I can get you. Before I know it, I'm on the phone with Stephen Hayes, And, he was real polite and invited me down because I was in Tampa, and his mother had a condo in Naples. He said, yeah, come on down and we'll talk. And, again, long story short, we talked for a while, and then I said, well, can you show me some of this? And he said, okay, I want you to punch me. And I was, kind of full of myself back then, not really as maybe polite and respectful as I should have been. So I'm thinking, hey, guy said punch him, man, I'm going to punch him.
He's asking for it.
Yeah, so I went to punch him, and the trees went by, sky went by. I landed into grass like this, and I had no reference. With all my martial experience, I had no reference for what had just been done to me. And I remember laying there going, oh man, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. And I did, I think, what a lot of us did the first year. I tried to keep up my other stuff and figure, I'm going to blend it and all of this stuff. And after a year, I realized, no, these guys figured it out hundreds of years ago. So I gave up everything and I followed him around the planet, for the next quite a few years, because back then, as you know, there weren't any schools.
Yeah.
So the only training opportunity was you'd get a thing in the mail that said, hey, next seminar that's being offered is in Leeds, England on these dates. Hope you can be there. This is how much it costs. That's all you got.
Wow.
you know.
Yeah.
You might be able to stay at this place, they'd say, if you were lucky, you know, but you had to figure it all out, you know. How do I get there, you know, and then I remember at one time complaining a little bit about the cost of it. Just looked me right in the eye and said, that's part of the training. Part of the training. You can't figure out how to come up with what it takes to be here. It's part of the training. So that's kind of a story of how I made my way into this thing. And a lot of different coincidences had to, you know, I don't believe in coincidences.
Sure.
So a lot of things had to line up for all that to happen. And then, you know, as he mentioned in training recently, you know, he actively tried to get rid of me
Yeah.
for the first several years. And now you're good at this other stuff, because I was real good at it, you know. And, yeah, you know, just stay with that. You know, you probably ought to quit this.
Wow.
Well, here I am.
Here you are, still
Here
here.
I am, still learning.
Well, in your Taijutsu, Toshindo, Ninjutsu practice, were there any particular low points or challenges that hit you, and what did you do to overcome those?
Yeah, I've had several of those, as you know, we all do if you're going to stay in it for a long period of time. Pretty early on, I had torn a hamstring almost off the bone.
Wow.
So I didn't have to have surgery, but I had to be wrapped up from the ankle to the hip for 9 months. Couldn't really bend my leg or anything, and so, well, there you go. Now I'm a bench sitter, but I learned a lot, you know, watching. Eventually got past that. And then I think the next big kind of wall that I ran into was I failed my second degree test like 4 times, you know, and I thought you know, oh, well, I guess I'll just hang out at this rank, just kept training, and, you know, eventually I figured out what I needed to correct. And then actually there was one before that. Back in the day, you know, you'd go somewhere for a seminar, and at the end of the seminar, they would announce promotions.
Okay.
So, you know, I thought, man, I'm moving good. I feel like I'm moving good. And I started to get to where I'd go to these things and, you know, okay, well, I should get, you know, because I was a white belt. And back then it was a white belt and then 9 levels of green belt.
Green belt, yeah.
So I've been doing this for 2.5 years. I'm a white belt with a lot of martial experience. And I thought, you know, well, this time I'm sure I'm going to get my green belt, you know. And they'd announce all the names. I didn't, oh, man, what is going on? And then I started to, you know, how we do as humans. So I started making it up in my head. I don't know what they've heard about me, but it ain't true. And, you know, they just don't like me.
Yeah.
And so I'm never going to, oh, well, I'm just going to keep showing up and learning what I can learn, forget about getting a belt. And then Anshu was visiting his mother again, and he said, hey, if you have the time, come down, you know. And I'm like, oh, heck yeah. I mean, private time with Stephen Hayes. So we walked on the beach, and then we did some training, and he invited me up for a glass of iced tea, and we're talking, having iced tea, and he just casually passes this paper over to me. Oh, sign that. You're a green belt now. Like, oh, wow, that was even cooler.
Even cooler.
Even cooler.
Yeah.
Even cooler. Yeah, yeah.
Well, conversely, did you have any like major high points in your martial arts career, like moments that you're particularly proud of, promotions or events?
Oh yeah. I've had several. The third degree to me was like, I call it, my language is crossing a bridge. You know, that was a big bridge for me to cross, the third degree, because I thought most people with reasonable skill can make second degree, but you know, third degree seemed to be a pretty big deal. And so that was a big moment for me. And then, you know, finally passing that fourth degree after 10 years, that was big. And then my Godan, the 5th degree test in Japan, that was a pretty big deal because I'd held off because I wanted to have back then what was a very real test, and you know, Hatsumi Sensei was doing, I mean, that sword had come down and hit the floor, you know. So, I don't have time to tell that whole story, but that was very big for me because the essence of that test is you can't really try to pass that test. It's about detachment. You have to be letting go and yet be connected at the same, if that makes any sense at all. Because that test has to do you. You don't do that test. And I remember that, remember it like it was yesterday. I was settling in, and I'm saying to myself, okay, you got to get ready to feel this. And I got to about, and all of a sudden my body moved and I'm standing up. And it took me a second to realize, wow, it just happened. It's over. He's hugging me and, saying, my Japanese wasn't good enough. I would give anything to go back and find out what he said in my ear. My Japanese wasn't good enough, but it did me. I'm like, God, it's over. It's done. That was a pretty big deal. And then my 8th degree, Anshu was very gracious about that, and we had a big celebration in Tampa. So that was a big moment for me.
I was there for that. I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a pretty big moment. That I never imagined. I just didn't. I kind of don't think in those terms. I'm just going to keep training. The bells happen or they don't. Doesn't matter. I'm after the knowledge. So that was a big deal. Yeah.